Only net taxpayers can vote.
Well, that's not the solution. I think what I said is the solution. That might be a mechanism to get us closer to that. And I do think that, look, I mean, as much as it is, it's very demonized now, looking back at the past, that the framers' plan was that only white male landowners would get to vote. And I certainly understand the racial objections to that. But you could at least understand where, from the founders' point of view, they were like, well, obviously everyone can't just vote. It's got to be someone who owns land.
One vote per household.
Yeah, well, like if you don't own land, then obviously they're just going to vote other people's stuff away, and then we'll all be poor. And so there's something to that.
Net taxpayer voting means that only people who are paying, obviously, are going to affect what gets paid for. And so right now, I'll tell you one big issue I have, right? So Democrats really want women in the draft, and conservatives really do not. And I'm just kind of like, conservatives are taking this very progressive position, and Democrats are taking this very progressive. They're both progressive positions. The Republican position is that women should be afforded all the rights and privileges of society and authority without civic responsibility. And Democrats are arguing men and women are the same. And they're both very progressive positions. So, if you go back to the suffrage movement, one thing that's lost in the conversation is that it only passed, 19th Amendment, because a deal was cut where women would not have to assume civic responsibility and would get the right to vote regardless. I think that was a huge mistake. I have no problem with women voting. By all means, please vote. But there's got to be equal civic responsibility. So if that means you're going to be fire brigade, it means you're going to be drafted. Drafted does not mean frontline infantry. It could mean administrative work, driving cars, cooking food, cleaning kitchens. But it means when the time comes and conflict arises, women are called to action in whatever way they can serve. Right now, we're in this reality where we have second-class citizens. Women get to vote. They don't have to die for it. And they can all collectively vote to send me to die, or younger men to die in Ukraine. And that's what they're doing. Democrats are overwhelmingly female and overwhelmingly vote for war and funding for Israel, too. Now, younger Democrats I know are opposed to funding Israel, but they love funding Ukraine. Not all of them. There's a lot of anti-war left, but they all fly the Ukrainian flags. Hundreds of billions of dollars pumped into that war machine, which is inching us towards a World War III where they may very well have to draft people. And it is predominantly liberal women. The Democratic Party is overwhelmingly female. 2/3 of millennial women are voting to go have men die in war. I think that's a nightmarish problem.
It's
particularly
foolish.
like single childless women. If you look if you break down the demographics.
To your point, when the founding fathers are like, you got to own property to vote because otherwise people will just vote away other people's stuff. I am not surprised the Democratic Party overwhelmingly favors funding of war when it has shifted so heavily into female territory where there's no consequences for the women who vote for it. There is. It's just long-term consequences, not short-term. Meanwhile, Harry Sisson, who loves Joe Biden, is going to be on the front lines. Should this actually expand into a deeper conflict, they have been, they keep saying, oh, the draft's not going to happen, but they
just automated it.
Congress keeps inching towards preparing selective service for a mass draft.
Yeah.
With the move from the Armed Services Committee to include women in the draft, anyone who thinks they're not getting ready for a draft is not paying attention.
Yeah, I don't want to be drafted. I'd give up my vote to not draft.
And that was the argument back in the 1900s.
Certainly.
The anti-suffragettes.
Well, it was not negotiated very well on the other end. I would say it was negotiated very well for women.
So my view is, I talked with Vivek about this. Either in order to vote, you have to sign up for selective service by choice, and you don't have to. If you don't vote. That's it. Or some people have proposed only net taxpayers vote.
I like that better.
Yeah.
But I think that, look, there's also...
Wait, real quick. How about if you vote for war, you are also simultaneously volunteering for it?
I think...
No, that I like.
That is a much better
that
option.
I really like
a much better option. I hope that would reduce our tax burden, too.
And I'll just add real quick. If a war came to these shores and I was asked to defend the Constitution, I don't like the Democrats or the Uniparty, but if it was about the core of this nation, I would vote yes, and I would gladly accept the consequences of what that means, volunteering to be active in that. In whatever way I could serve to defend this country.
I would never support a war that I wasn't willing to fight in myself.
Correct.
Bingo.
I mean, there's not one. And I don't know, that's just like, especially since having kids, especially because it's just like I feel like an obligation of like I can't die because I got little kids.
Right.
You know, it's like I kind of felt different when I was like single, where it's like I don't know, if something happens to me, it happens to me. But now I'm like I can't at least for a few more years. I got to like see these kids.
If you look at the senator and congressmen who are voting for war, go through and see if any of their children are enlisted.
Right. It's very rare. It's very rare for that's the case. But look. It would just be insane. I mean, I'm 41, so I'm not exactly like the prime target to like get drafted, but I'm still an able-bodied man. How would I be sitting here saying, hey, there's this fight, and I think this is a worthwhile fight. You guys go do that. Like, no, if I was going to support a war, I'd be willing to go fight and die in that war. And so I do think it's crazy that anyone gets to, you know, kind of have no skin in the game in that sense and fight. Yep. But to your greater point, look, there's no question you'd have to at least admit that there's a huge incentive issue for non-net taxpayers to get to vote. Like, there's just a huge incentive problem there, which is that there's a conflict of interest. Like, of course, like, you know, and look, Mitt Romney said this, if you remember, in 2012 and got a lot of heat for it. And he said it because the way he said it was kind of dismissive of those people, I guess. I forget his exact language, but there was the thing about how 47% of people are net tax receivers, net benefit receivers.
Yeah.
And that he was like, look, the message of like lower taxes to them isn't an appealing message because they're receiving benefits. So you're basically saying you're going to cut their benefits and they don't pay taxes. So how does that help them? And, you know, I think he called them takers or something like that. And then they were like, oh, you're saying people on Social Security are takers. And it got into that. Yep. But there was a real point that he was making there, which is that there's a huge portion of the electorate who are like living off the dole.
Here's the progression of the American electorate, very easily explained. Elections favor the unemployed.
Oh, 100%.
If you do not have a job,
that's a good point.
It's easy to go vote.
Yeah.
And that means the interests of the unemployed will outweigh the interests of the employed.
Or at least disproportionately.
Anybody who works overtime and has a really stressful job, they're much less likely to vote.
And so what does that mean? It also means that childless people are favored and their interests will be outweighed.
Yeah.
Or their interests outweigh. So if you are a parent with kids and you have work, you get off work, it's election day, I got to pick up the kids from school. What do? Well, you pick up the kids from school and then you're like, I can't vote. And so I think election day should be one day, paper ballots, and a holiday. Yeah. And, you know, Republicans have said, well, that'll be benefiting Democrats. I'm like, I disagree.
No.
I think based on today's data, where voting is now, it looks like it will. But if you allow families to actually take the time off to go and vote, you will get more mothers and fathers voting and more hardworking Americans voting.
Look at what LA did and then do the opposite of that. Yeah. LA has a voting period that lasts 11 days, and they have special centers all over the county where you can drop your ballot at any time. So take that model and do the complete opposite, and then you'll have a better outcome.
Yeah. But there's something to the dynamic that, because it's kind of like this vicious cycle where, you know, like democracy leads to growth in the size of government. Bigger government does everything it can to undermine families and communities and religion because it's a threat to their kind of, you know, their rule or their monopoly on their rule. And then the more you undermine families, the more kind of like single childless women you have. And well, look, I'm just saying everybody knows the dynamic I'm talking about. When you talk about there's these women who do not have kids who end up trying to mother society, who are trying to kind of like, you know who's not trying to mother society? My wife. Because she's already a mother. She's already got kids to mother. She doesn't need to try to like have a safe space on a college campus or something like that. And that is a problem.
And I'll make one quick point before we jump to a last segment I want to squeeze in. When it comes to the media, the women who are writing these articles about feminism and the goals of women, they are single childless women.
They are.
Why? It's a pressure system. This is how I refer to these things. If you are single and childless, it's easy for you to write all the time. If you are a mom with raising a kid, you have much less time to write these things, or you're not writing them at all.
It is challenging.
So media
that's a big
overwhelmingly favors feminists.
Well, that's a big part of it, but it's also the fact that, look, parenting is something that is hardwired into us. Like, no matter what your politics are, you can always say the reason the species exists is because we keep having more of us. And so that, and particularly women. And this is something that almost every woman knows, or if she herself hasn't experienced it, then like all of her girlfriends have experienced it.
It's a hormonal instinct.
Women have baby fever. They see babies and they're like, oh my God, I haven't had a baby yet. I want to have a baby, like in a way that men don't. And so there also is, not only do they have more time, but there's this impulse. And I think it's a beautiful impulse. It's just when it's applied in the wrong directions, it can be destructive.
It's Nurse Ratched.
But yes, right. Right. It's like this nurturing impulse to take care of things. This is why they all get cats, right? Like when they don't have kids, they get cats.
Yep.
And also they get,
toxoplasmosis. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.